Alright, welcome. This is Sports 101. Yes, that's sports with a dollar sign, because we know it's all about the money. I'm your host, Will Maldonado, and we've got a fantastic show in store for you today. We're going to play one of my absolute favorites, Good Deal, Bad Deal, where we'll discuss some of the crazy contracts and some of the things that have come out in the sports world within the last few weeks, months, days, and years. Later on, we're going to have some fantastic guests on our program. We're going to have Brittany Burkett. She is a master's student at the University of San Francisco, looking to get her master's in sport management. We'll also have James Nicholson. James is an LAKings.com insider. He's been on with us before, and we're going to talk a little puck. And then we're going to end our show with a little bit more real estate talk, which I know is a big deal. Well, let's get right into this real quick and play Good Deal, Bad Deal. The first deal we're going to discuss was announced over the weekend. That is a deal and an arrangement that we've been discussing for a long time, and that's Pacquiao versus Mayweather. The contracts have finally been signed, and we're kind of starting to get estimates for what it's going to be. So the question is, was this a good deal or a bad deal for both sides involved? So the first thing you need to know about this deal is that to get it done, Pacquiao is the one who had to give a few things up to Mayweather. Pacquiao initially wanted a 50-50 split when this fight was first discussed 5 years ago. However, in order to get the contract signed and done and get the fight made, Pacquiao had to agree to a 60-40 split. Initial expectations are that the total purse for this will equal about $200 million, shattering boxing records. They're expecting of that purse, Mayweather to get about $120 million and Pacquiao to get about $80 million. The gate for the revenue at the event is expected to be around $40 million of just people attending, with some seats going, ringside seats going for $5,000. HBO and Showtime are going to collaborate to put together the pay-per-view. That's kind of a crazy thing that does not happen a lot in boxing, actually. Usually it's one or the other leads the way in the pay-per-view. But they know this is a big fight, so they're going to come together for this. It's expected to get over $150 million in pay-per-view revenue, and that's going to set a ton of records. And when you really look at this, the reason why is that's going to be a little more expensive than the typical Mayweather fight. They're talking about an extra $20-$30 for the pay-per-view than usual. Usually it's about $65 to $75. You're going to look about $85 to $90 are the initial projections for your pay-per-view event for this one. It's going to be huge, though, and people are going to pony up the money because this has been a fight that the public has been clamoring for years. So who is this a good deal for? This is absolutely a good deal for Mayweather. He's going to stand to make a ton of money. He's getting a diminished Pacquiao. Pacquiao is not what he once was, and he's probably got a good chance to unify the title belts and really continue on his record, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of risk for him. Is this a good deal, bad deal for Pacquiao? Well, Pac-Man's the one who is getting squeezed a little bit. As I mentioned, that 60-40 split hurts. Pacquiao's used to being the guy who's getting the dominant amount of the purse. But in this situation, where Mayweather is the fighter who more people want to see and are paying for, he's just doing better at this stage in his career. Pac-Man got knocked out a couple years ago. Obviously, he was going to have to, kind of acquiesce to what Mayweather wanted to do here. Getting the fight done is bigger. That's because he's still going to make a ton of money. That's a lot of money, even if he isn't getting the dominant amount of the purse. It's going to be a great fight, and I think Pacquiao got a good deal. And ultimately, what ended up happening here is a good deal for boxing fans. It's been something that, and not even just boxing fans, casual fans of sports. Pacquiao versus Mayweather has been talked about for years, a ton of years. And finally getting the opportunity to see it play out in front of our eyes is going to be something that sports fans are going to cherish. May 2nd is looking chock full of events. There's going to be Pacquiao Mayweather, the last day of the NFL draft, the Kentucky Derby. It's going to be a full-fledged sporting day. So you're going to want to be on your couch. You're going to want to be tuning in. There's going to be things for you to watch all day long. You will not want to miss May 2nd. Our next good deal, bad deal topic has to do with Adidas. So Adidas worked with the Combine, and they came up with a contract that said they were going to give $100,000 to the 3 fastest recorded 40-yard dashes at the NFL Combine. Obviously, the NFL Combine somehow, some way, has become a mega viewing event. NFL Network has done a fantastic job capitalizing on people's thirst and desire to learn more about the draft, and really just put on a 3-day show that gets them pretty decent ratings, gets them a lot of money fluctuating in, gets a lot of media exposure, and really has done the NFL a great service. So Adidas is trying to capitalize on that with this $100,000 for the 3 fastest combine times. Originally, actually, they wanted to give away Porsches, but there were some complications in the contracts with that. They switched to the $100,000 giveaway. So we have 3 winners for that. Trey Waynes out of Michigan State ran a 4.31. Philip Dorsett out of Miami ran a 4.33. And Kevin White out of West Virginia ran a 4.35. Now, what if I told you those 3 actually weren't the 3 fastest at the NFL Combine? Because they weren't. There was actually one person who was faster. That was UAB wide receiver J.J. Nelson, who clocked a 4.28, which is incredibly fast. And Chris Connolly of Georgia, who tied Kevin White of West Virginia with a 4.35. So what does that say? What does that mean? How come J.J. Nelson wasn't announced as a winner, and how come Chris Connolly wasn't announced as a co-winner? Well, what it really comes back down to is Adidas wanted to get exposure for their brand. They were unwilling to give J.J. Nelson or Chris Conley the $100,000 because they weren't wearing Adidas shoes at the Combine. Additionally, they had not signed a deal to be sponsored by Adidas going forward. So is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal? Well, this looks kind of like a bad deal for the athletes and the prospects that are competing at the NFL Combine. And it's something that the NFL is really going to have to look into. If you're going to have a company coming in and saying, hey, we're going to give it to the 3 fastest Combine times, then regardless of if those guys are wearing their shoes or not, they should be able to win. You know, if J.J. Nelson ran a blazing fast time, faster than anybody else, and he's not going to be considered the winner, it makes Adidas look a little bit tacky, to be honest. It makes them look like the only thing they care about is their exposure, and they're not actually negotiating in good faith for these kind of things. I understand you got to put stipulations in contracts and really kind of try and make sure that there's good brand awareness and exposure for your own individual brand, but doing that at the expense of just it didn't come out as good brand exposure, because every article had to mention those guys weren't the 3 fastest. There were 2 other guys who were, at the same level. And so it's a little disappointing, and I think it ends up being a bad deal for Adidas and kind of makes them look bad. So the final good deal, bad deal we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the Golden State Warriors and the price they were purchased for. The Warriors were purchased for $450 million by Peter Gruber and Joe Lacob a few years ago. And you don't even need to question this anymore. This is absolutely 100% a good deal. I bring this up today because the Atlanta Hawks are now on the selling block. The Hawks and their new stadium together are valued between $800 and $1 billion. So that's going to fetch a pretty penny for the Hawks. It's going to be fantastic for them. The Warriors, in the meantime, are also building their own new stadium in San Francisco, so I wonder what their valuation was recently at $800 million, and that was before the stadium had been built. They are going to be a franchise worth well over $1.3 billion.
This is ridiculous.
And it is ridiculous. Sports become big business, and the way I like to compare people who are buying professional franchises is it's kind of like buying an art piece. You're doing it for the exposure. You're doing it so that you can sit courtside. You're doing it so that you can really kind of show off that you've got the money and that you can spend it on something so frivolous. And you get to be in the owners club. It's a very elite group. There's only 30 people who can own an NBA franchise at one time. And if you own one, it's quite a big deal. When you look at recent deals that have been done, the Clippers were sold last year for $2 billion to Steve Ballmer of Microsoft. When you look at a deal that's coming on the horizon, the Nets are valued at $1.2 billion, and their stadium, the Barclays Center, which was just built, is being valued at $1.1 billion. There is so much money in this, and it's absolutely insane. It's one of those things you look at and go, wow, there is money in sports, there's money to be had, and these billionaires know what they're doing when they make these purchases. All right, so that's it for Good Deal, Bad Deal. We've got a great segment coming up. We'll have Britt Burkett joining us. She is a sports management master's candidate at the University of San Francisco. She's doing some great work, and we're going to talk a little bit about that coming up after the break. Remember, this is Sports 101. That's sports with a dollar sign, or the S. All right, welcome back. This is Sports 101. Yes, that's sports with a dollar sign for the S, because we know it's all about the money. I'm your host, Will Maldonado, and I have a fantastic segment coming up that I am so excited for. We're going to have the wonderful Britt Burkett on the line. Britt, how you doing?
I'm so great, Will. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining me. Britt is a sports management master's candidate at the University of San Francisco. She's working her way through the sports industry and doing some fantastic things. So, Britt, let's get it started. How'd you get your start in the sports industry?
So I started out actually volunteering at a couple of games in my teens, where I was just working kind of event management, game management, and doing all of that. And then once I got into school for undergrad, I went to Santa Clara University and kind of pushed my way in and ended up with an internship with the men's basketball team at Santa Clara University in the Bay Area, and just kind of catapulted from there.
Absolutely, and you've done some fantastic things in your career since then, including working for USC on their sideline stadium event operations during football season, and also you've brought one of your passions down with you. You are a yogi, and it's absolutely fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about yoga. How'd you first get introduced?
So actually, my first introduction to yoga was in 2006, where I practiced Bikram yoga, which is a hot yoga typically heated to around 113 degrees with some humidity, and that was in 2006. I tried it about twice and decided it wasn't for me. And then I had a pretty serious injury in 2010 where I was pretty immobile, unable to walk. It was a spinal injury, and yoga was the best way for me to rehab and get back to where I am now.
And that's a key point, and I will attest to this because I've met with you plenty of times before. She now always wears high heels, so the yoga worked, folks. She can walk in high heels and do it with class and is an absolute amazing person. So this whole thing about yoga as a rehabilitation technique, as something that can be used to people when they're feeling sore, when they're having issues like that, I think it's fantastic, and I think it means a lot for the sporting industry going forward. And I know that you yourself are really wanting to bring yoga to athletes and really start to help work with professionals and collegiate athletes as well as even high school athletes to really help them. So what do you feel that yoga can provide for athletes?
You know, there's a lot of different benefits. I like that we're starting kind of off with this injury positioning, and as I personally used it as a way to rehab, my approach is to use it as a preventative way to prevent my athletes from injuries and strains, just to kind of prolong their career longevity and do all of that. So that's definitely key for me. That's always my priority. And another thing that it also helps with my athletes is obviously there's physical benefits. They have all of their rigorous routines that they develop through their strength and conditioning coaches, their skills coaches, and just practices in general. But there's different ways and different avenues that they're able to receive some physical benefits from that as well, just because there's different way that your body stretches in using traditional yoga as opposed to what they would learn from their traditional strength and conditioning routine.
Yeah, it's actually a question I have for you real quick. Do you have to kind of tailor it for athletes in different sports? Is there a different kind of yoga techniques or stretches that you'll do for an athlete who plays basketball as opposed to an athlete who will play football?
Absolutely. So the thing is, any yoga instructor can come in and teach yoga to any sort of population, whether that be athletes or elderly or even pregnant women. And the thing that makes what I do kind of special is I definitely tailor it specific to the needs of athletes and definitely across different sports. So it's really about having a good understanding of the physicality of what athletes you'll be working with. So to answer your specific question, for basketball players, we really need to open up their hips and their hamstrings and their shoulders, and that's actually very similar for your football players. So having an understanding of what the needs are of your clients and of your athletes is really key, because the types of things that we'll be having them do in yoga is going to be very different from what you would experience having an athlete just go into any sort of a regular yoga studio.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that I think you're doing a great job with. I know you've actually already started working with athletes, on this kind of thing, some professional, some collegiate, as we've said. How do you intend on really growing this business and making this a business for yourself currently and in the future?
So as of right now, I've been in business formally I've just hit the 2-year mark. And informally, I've been working with athletes just because I've been around the scene and have friends that are athletes for quite a while, for about 5 years or so. And to really build it, I mean, at this point, a lot of my clients have come through word of mouth, which has been really fantastic because I've had the exposure to work with a lot of professional athletes, mostly NFL players, who have kind of put my name out there a little bit and have referred me to others. Whereas right now it's pretty sustainable. But at this point, in order to grow my business, I know that I need to put more effort in doing some more traditional forms of marketing and getting the funding for that. And I think something that would be really key, especially because I'm so big on establishing relationships with my clients, I think would be to have an athlete that I've been working with, no one specific at this moment, but someone in the future that is willing to kind of put the name out there in terms of creating some awareness and putting the name out there, just like I'm saying, just so that I have people developing more of an interest and an understanding and awareness in the yoga.
Well, absolutely. And, as long as I get to work on shows such as this and get the opportunity to really talk about sports and talk about the industry, I'm always here to help you out with that. If you've got someone who you want to have on the air and, talk a little bit about what you provide them, we can always make that happen. So,
well, thanks, Will.
Well, of course. You know me, Britt. We have a fantastic relationship at the University of San Francisco as colleagues in that sport management program. So the next thing I want to actually talk about goes back to sport management and our program. And that's, I know you're working on a research paper, and let's talk about that a little bit. So could you explain your kind of research thesis and what you're looking into?
Absolutely. So this is something that I've been working on for about 8 months now. So I have partnered up with a basketball team in the Southern California area. And basically, in a short sense, what I'm looking at is the yoga benefits specifically for athletes. So like we talked about earlier, I'm looking at mainly injury prevention as well as the physical benefits. So the thing that I think is most important that we haven't touched on yet is the mental component of it. And the things that I've been looking at are kind of the mental preparation for athletes in terms of visualization and mental rehearsal, incorporating some breathing, things that can help them out with their concentration, their goal setting, and coping under pressure, which has been really huge. So it's kind of taking that element of sport performance and fusing it with sports psychology, which has been very interesting.
And let me cut in on there for you real quick. I've actually done a guided meditation with Britt Burkett, and she was fantastic at it. And it's something that really got me into more meditation. We spoke about this recently when we were trading some text messages back and forth, and how I've been listening a lot to the words of Deepak Chopra. And I can totally understand and vouch for that. Getting your mental health, prepared and feeling good in your brain, that's something so key and critical for athletes. And it's going to make a difference in the future. And it's going to be something that the studies haven't quite been done and haven't been quite produced. So the fact that you're looking into that is absolutely outstanding, Britt, because I think it's something that if it really gets understood better, you're going to have the situation where the athletes are going to get even better than they are now. And we think of athletes being so great and fantastic, but if you can get that mental part really, really down and understood better than it is, sometimes we kind of disassociate and we struggle to understand what makes an athlete great. And we know there's some kind of mental makeup in there that changes things. But if we can really, key into it through these kind of meditative things, through yoga, through the way to kind of help assist our athletes, we could have guys shattering records. We could have the next Michael Jordans. We could have the next amazing players out there. So the fact that you're doing that, I think, is so interesting. So
Thank you, Will.
Oh, of course. You know I'm always supportive of your work. And folks, not only does she do yoga and is a fantastic person who, helps with guided meditations and things like that and runs around, but when I say she's doing research, she is heavy into research. She loves doing data analysis. You still having fun with SPSS? Britt?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, are you
What
still
about
having fun
SPSS?
with the SPSS there? I know that's one of your pet projects that you love doing. Are you actually using that for your research?
Yes, actually. So I'm in the process of just finishing the data collection, which means that I'm still working with my population because they've actually made it to playoffs, and they're just about to play their semifinal game for their section title, which is fantastic. So I'm still working with the team, but through all of the surveys and assessments and all of the data that I've collected, I've started analyzing that, which has been a great process. It definitely takes a lot of time, but it's been really interesting to yield kind of the results in that and see kind of how things are progressing and how I'm able to establish some breakthroughs to contribute to a better understanding of what's going on in our industry in the terms of sport performance and sport psychology, which has been great.
So you mentioned that your data collection, is it quantitative? Are you looking at like weight? Are you looking at like size, stretchability, or is it more like qualitative and you're really looking at the athlete health, or is it kind of a mixture of the two?
It's interesting you asked that. It's a combination of both. So on the quantitative side, what I've actually done is I've developed a physical assessment to look at the physical benefits that they have found over time. So it's a 3-part assessment where we started it right before we even began any sort of yoga training at the beginning of their preseason, or before their league games rather, excuse me. And then halfway through the season, and then once they're done with their playoff series, then we'll do the final one. So that's been developed, and we're looking at a bunch of different things like flexibility and range of motion, stability and balance. And so those things are quantifiable. And then I'm also doing the injury prevention where I'm looking at that factor in terms of the injuries they've had the season previous and comparing it to the injuries that they've had this year. And I'm also looking at statistical performance, and that kind of incorporates with the mental training side of it to see if there may be a significant relationship that could lead to a correlation between the two. And then there's also some qualitative stuff in there as well, where when we talk about the mental aspect and the side of things, we talk about, like I said, goal setting and coping under pressure. So it gives them an opportunity to vocalize that in an open-ended question type thing. And I've also been able to receive formal feedback from coaching staff in terms of how they think it's influenced their game and their playing and all of that. So it's great because I'm able to draw upon different types of data collection in terms of both quantitative and qualitative.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic, and I think it's a great testament to the fact that they're making the playoffs, and they're doing, they're in sectionals and doing great, and you're helping them, so that must be a lot of fun for you to be around that. And, hey, I can't say that you're not helping them, because obviously you're looking at things and trying to do things in a new, different way, and they are having results on the court. So that sounds great for you. Well, Britt, it's been great having you on. I've appreciated it a lot. You're extremely knowledgeable about these kind of subjects. You are a fantastic yoga instructor, I am sure. You can always plug yourself if you want here and kind of talk a little bit about your business at the end here, or if you'd like, and to get some referrals and see if anybody's interested in working with you, you can always do that. Is there anything they can contact you? Any place they can contact you?
Absolutely, yes. I have an email, which is one of the best ways to reach me, and that's Britt, BRITT at yogafit4athlete.com.
Yep. So thank you so much, Britt. I really appreciate having you on the program. That was Britt Burkett. She is a master's candidate for sport management at the University of San Francisco. She's doing great work in the field of injury prevention as well as athlete mental preparation using yoga, and she is an entrepreneur and going to do great things in the future. Thank you so much for coming on, Britt.
Thank you, Will.
All right. Coming up next, we'll have James Nicholson on the air. James is the insider for LAKings.com, and he's going to come on and we're going to talk a little bit of hockey. Remember, this is Sports 101. That's sports with a $ for the S, where we talk about the business side of sports because we know it's all about the money. All right, welcome back. This is Sports 101. Yes, that's sports with a $ for the S because we know it's all about the money.
Check, please.
We have a fantastic segment coming up again right now. We just got off the phone with Britt Burkett, who is doing a part of a business called Yoga for Athletes. And now our next segment, we're going to have an LAKings.com insider, James Nicholson, on the air with us. James, are you there?
I am here. How are you, Will?
I'm doing fantastic. How's your day going?
It's going very good after some exciting hockey developments over the last week.
It has been quite an interesting time for hockey in this last week. Obviously, we're getting close to the playoff push. We've got the trade deadline coming up, but we like to talk about business side of things. So let's talk about a big event that was thrown and that your team was actually involved in, and that is the Stadium Series game that happened this weekend between the LA Kings and the San Jose Sharks. James, what was your experience and what did you see with that?
Well, I actually was not at this one. I was at last year's Dodger Stadium one. This time I did not make the trip. I worked from home for it. Talking with the team staff and a lot of people who were involved and some league people, it was incredible. The Levi Stadium, I guess, was just a terrific venue, extremely accommodating. They knew it was all state-of-the-art. I don't think they actually realized how state-of-the-art everything was and how comfortable everything was, especially for an outdoor hockey game on the West Coast. I think a lot of people really enjoyed it. Media had a tough time, I guess, seeing the ice from the press box. Didn't necessarily have the best sight lines, but I think it'd be comparable to Dodger Stadium last year. And the biggest thing that I heard, which was from a lot of players on both teams, is that the ice just did not hold up after the first 5 minutes of the game.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of quotes about that saying, if you look at the ice at the start of the period, it would be about a 7 or an 8, which is pretty good, and then by like 5 minutes in, you're looking at a 3-level skating, and that kind of might have hurt the Sharks. I know you and I were exchanging texts during that game, and the Sharks are a fast team. They try to play fast, and they might have tried to play a little too fast with the poor ice.
Yeah. I think I actually sent you a text that said I think they're playing too fast for their own good. I think when they were able to muck it up a little bit, they had some really good opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to touch back on that you mentioned before was the sightlines. I actually got to see a lot of pictures. Obviously, I'm from the Bay Area, have a lot of friends, family still up in that neck of the woods, and several of them went to the game. And one of them was very disheartened. She's a casual fan. She's not a rabid fan, but she does follow the Sharks, from San Jose. Try to get in that and was really excited for the kind of event and the extravaganza, which is what the league and the Sharks and the Kings were hoping for. But she bought lower bowl tickets. And so she was, about 20 rows up. But she had a hard time seeing. And she said, quite frankly, she goes, I wish I'd bought seats a little bit cheaper, 20 more rows up, because it was hard to see. And I know the sight lines necessarily for the fans in that lower level and the press, they're a little difficult. And so it's something that I think they maybe need to reassess going forward if they're going to have, games at like stadiums such as, a football stadium, because it's different seat height in comparison to like a baseball stadium where I think that's had a little bit more success before. But then again, they also shattered, an attendance record in California. That was the third highest ever attended hockey game, period. And they had a 70,000 person attendance there. So could you talk about that a little bit and what that means for the league?
Well, I think the league realizes that California is becoming a very, I'm not going to say predominant, but I will say a very successful hockey market. There's 3 teams, in California, in the NHL, and they're all very successful. I mean, in the last 8 years, 3 Stanley Cups have come through California. And, the team that hasn't won the Cup is a contender every single year with the Sharks. And, we're seeing more and more players come out of Southern California, whether it's Kevin Miller, who it looks like might end up being out for the season with the Boston Bruins, Matt Nieto with the Sharks, Emerson Edom with the Ducks, there's good hockey players coming out of California.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's really all three organizations made a commitment to doing. That is, it's great to see, is they've really gotten to the community and tried to develop those junior level teams. I know the Sharks do the junior Sharks. I'm sure the Kings and the Ducks have those same kind of programs to really bring hockey to this California community, because we've got a ton of people here in California. There's room for people to fall in love with hockey, and you're playing inside most of the time. You don't have to be outside, even though the outside spectacle is fantastic. But it's one of those things, if you develop the kind of core culture, and it seems to have worked, and you're right, it's happened because you've had three teams who have had a lot of success. You started with the Kings, were the first ones here, and they made the biggest move probably to happen to the NHL when they acquired Wayne Gretzky back in the early 90s, and that totally shifted how hockey was perceived in California, because you brought an elite athlete at the top of his game to a place that wasn't quite sure how they felt about hockey still at that time. There were some, there were definitely Kings fans, but that took it to another level entirely. And then you got two expansion franchises, one of whom is named after a Disney movie that had done incredibly well and led to 3 sequels. And then you had the Sharks start, and they were kind of a weird franchise how they got started, with a split from the Minnesota North Stars, with the Dallas Stars taking half the team and the Sharks taking half the team, and getting some picks and things like that. And hockey's just kind of, since the 90s, just kept growing in California. And isn't that kind of what the Stadium Series game really boils down to, what it was about? Showing off California's love for hockey, showing off how well hockey does in California?
Absolutely. I think that started last year with the game at Dodger Stadium between the Kings and the Ducks. And then this year, everyone in the league right now knows one of the best rivalries in the league is between the San Jose Sharks and the Los Angeles Kings. Why not put them outdoors? Why not put them in the Bay Area in a brand spanking new stadium that's going to be cool and exciting, and really have a great game that's going to, they sold, I think, over 70,000 tickets. You can't go wrong with that, right?
Oh, yeah, and there was a fervor for it. They had people showing up, I think, 3 hours before the game, tailgating and doing the whole kind of thing. But there is one problem that I really foresee that kind of came to light with this game, and it's kind of the con of California hockey. Most hockey teams, hockey fans, are East Coast based, or in Canada. There's the West Coast has always been kind of the little brother in the NHL, and it's because it's late night starts. If you have a 7 o'clock game on the West Coast, that's 10 o'clock on the East, and people are asleep by the end of the second period. And it's hard for sometimes the West Coast teams to get the exposure and things like that. And I think the Stadium Series kind of highlighted that a little bit, because from everything I've heard, the overnight ratings on NBC Sports Network, which again is not the premier place to put events like that. It's a good thing for the network there, but it's not on traditional NBC or anything like that. The ratings weren't that great, and it probably ties into the start time. They started the game around 7:30. That's 10:30 on the East Coast, and just East Coast fans aren't going to tune into that.
Right. And, you have this really, I think, in every sport. The nationally televised game that starts on the West Coast. If we talk about baseball games, that are going to be nationally televised on the West Coast, they start at 5 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock. And you couldn't do that just because of the ice. You had to have the sun setting. You had to have it a little bit cooler in order to try to uphold the quality of the ice. I think the league knows that. And next year there's going to be 3 outdoor games. The first one, the Winter Classic game on New Year's Day will be in Boston, between Boston and Montreal, which is a heck of a traditional rivalry. And last year's playoff series, really added to that quite a bit. And then they're going to do a game in Minnesota. And the people of Minnesota have been clamoring, it seems like for years, to get an outdoor game in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah,
so they're going to get their outdoor game. And then Denver, the Colorado Avalanche, will play in an outdoor game as well next year.
And those seem like 3 very good markets to kind of have the outdoor game in, obviously. A little bit cooler. You don't have to worry so much about the temperature outside or about the ice melting, doing all those kind of things. In those areas, it should be good. And there's also that strong just core love of hockey in those areas as well. So I think that'll be fantastic. My one concern with this Stadium Series and that they've been doing the last couple of years is, on some level, it feels like it might start to get a little stale. when you're, the specialness of it. I remember when they first did the Winter Classic. It was such an incredible special event, and the 24/7 really went into like making it just fantastic. And then this year, it seems like the shine, it's still there a little bit because you're getting to do it for the first time in new locations. This is the first Northern California one, things like that. But do they run the risk of kind of losing the allure to these events if they're just doing them so often every year?
I mean, it's not like they're not selling out every time they go somewhere. It's working. I think, they're tapping back into Boston because Boston works. I think this will be Boston's third or fourth outdoor game. It works well for them. Chicago plays in an outdoor game, it seems like, every single year. They are slated to play in the outdoor game in Minnesota. Detroit plays in a lot of outdoor games. They're going to play Colorado next year. Where it works, it works. The California things, I think, are done for the next few years. I think, we've had the fun with it. The allure has happened, and now it's maybe time to reward the quote-unquote traditional hockey markets now a little bit.
Yep, the original 6 and then the big hockey markets and the Midwest and East Coast, obviously. Well, we got a couple other things I'd like to talk about here today, one of which I know you know a lot about, and you are going to be considered the expert on this because I don't know too much, and that's the NHL, obviously the league, has made a big change to their website. They have finally started to embrace what we call advanced statistics. Advanced statistics are mostly known in baseball more than any other sport, but they're starting to kind of wrinkle in to other sports and become a much more mainstream kind of thing. And the NHL is trying to get on board that ship. And so they changed their statistics page. This launched last Friday, and it's had a few challenges, some successes. So let's talk a little bit about that, James. What have you seen so far, and what does it mean that the NHL is really starting to embrace in advanced statistics?
Well, first of all, the web page, the new stats page on NHL.com is great. Someone who is on that page almost daily and has to use that as a resource all the time, it's now so much easier to use. I'm extremely thrilled with what they've done with it. Now they're not calling them advanced stats, they're calling them enhanced stats. So, the old advanced stats, you have Corsi, which is all shots attempted towards the goal. So that includes shots that go on net, shots that miss the net, and shots that are blocked. You have Fenwick, which is shots that are attempted and shots that miss. You have PDO, which is your shooting percentage, so the number of times you take a shot and it scores as a goal, plus the save percentage. And that's kind of to measure how lucky your team is currently. And they're changing those names. So Corsi is actually a goaltending coach who is currently, I believe, with the St. Louis Blues. His name's Jim Corsi. He developed that stat really as a way to try to measure the workload for a goalie, and it has turned into the possession stat. So that's going to be now shots attempted. Fenwick is going to be called USAT, so unblocked shots attempted. And PDO is going to be shooting plus save percentage.
Now, see, this is something I've actually heard a little bit of blowback from just the kind of blogging community, because advanced enhanced statistics really started from bloggers, folks like yourself, who were going the extra mile to kind of monitor sites, and you had some really great sites out there that already did a lot of those things. And what the NHL seems to kind of have done here is gone and absolved the work these others have done, changed the name of stuff, and kind of like calling it their own. And I know there's been some kind of pushback from the community that's like, hey, give us credit where credit is due. So what do you kind of think about that? Do you think it's just kind of a necessary thing of doing business, or what do you feel?
Oh, man, it's hard. I think no matter what, someone's going to be a little bit unhappy. The blogging community is where this all started. Other than Jim Corsi developing Corsi with, at the time, the Buffalo Sabres. But Fenwick is named after a blogger who covers the Calgary Flames. PDO is another blogger. Like, the statistic of PDO is this guy's username on this blog and hockey stats forum. So they named the stat after his screen name. So now it's being changed a little bit, and it's not, the names aren't incorrect. I'll say that. The shots attempted, yes, that makes sense for Corsi. unblocked shots attempted for Fenwick. I think it's. I mean, if we want to go into the business side of it, it's a rebranding of statistics. It's the NHL taking these statistics and making them their own because it's their game. It's their statistics anyways. Other people have just been, researching them for them, and now they have the opportunity to kind of come in and take care of it themselves.
And from a business standpoint, I think that's a smart move. Sorry to cut you off, but I think it's a smart move because of this. Moneyball had such a change on the perception and how fans view sports. And, baseball really, really did a lot of the hard plowing. And it became kind of like a cool niche thing. It was, a niche thing at first where it was kind of just a few people did it here and there. But baseball made it such like a big thing that it became such a part of the vernacular. It got people speaking in that so often. And it really kind of just like brought a new level of fan to the game. And, it spawned in baseball the Sabre Conference. It's spawned in other sports, the MIT conference that they have for analytics every year where they discuss big developments and things like that. And it's really a new kind of way of attracting interest. And yeah, sometimes it is a little bit nerdy. It's a lot of data and a lot of analysis and things like that. But it's something that's so good for the sport to kind of reach out to people on a different level, not just literally that was a great play and, things like that, where you really want to kind of make it interesting in a new kind of format. So I think the NHL, yeah, they are kind of taking it from them and they're rebranding the stats and they're doing that for them. And some bloggers are going to be hurt and a little like, hey, where's my credit? Where, at least keep the name that I came up with it. But you're right. It's the NHL's game. It's the NHL's stats. It was just someone else was compiling them. So the NHL said, hey, we're doing that now.
Yeah, and it's the thing that I feel is really interesting about this is part of a 5-year plan for the NHL statistics website. They are developing some stuff like, currently you can't look at, how shots attempted percentage is developing throughout a game, which is something that I really like to do because I think it gives me a solid idea of how the game is trending period to period. So now that's not necessarily available. It will be eventually through the league's website. And, the teams and the league have known that there's something to this. The founder of ExtraSkater.com got hired by Toronto last year. There's been some really good analytics bloggers in one who covered the Panthers who got hired by an NHL team. The Toronto Maple Leafs hired their assistant GM, Kyle Dubas, because he was an analytics guy. So the league knows there's something to this. And they know they have an opportunity to kind of, make it a little bit more uniform.
Absolutely, and when you do that, you help your brand, you kind of take it to another level, and you really get some changes going in your industry. All right, James, it's been fantastic having you on. I really appreciate it. We always have a great time chatting about hockey, and you're always welcome back on, and we'll discuss some hockey a little bit more here soon.
Thank you very much, Will. I always appreciate coming on with you.
All right, thank you. Everybody, that was James Nicholson. He is an insider for LAKings.com. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about real estate again. I love to do that and talk about stadium development deals, and I know in San Diego, this is a big one. Everyone's worried about the Chargers, so we're going to talk a little bit about the recent developments there. Remember, this is Sports 101. That's sports with a $ for the S, because we know it's all about the money. We'll be back after this. All right, welcome back. This is Sports 101. Yes, that's sports with a $ for the S. I'm your host, Will Maldonado, in lovely, sunny San Diego, California on this fine Thursday afternoon. All right, we've got our last segment of the day coming up. We just had a great discussion with James Nicholson, the LAKings.com insider, talking a little bit of hockey. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about something I'm very passionate about, and that is stadium developments. I think stadium acquisition, stadium is being built, and the process that the cities and teams have to play out to get stuff like that done is very interesting, and it's big business, and I want to talk about it because we've had a lot go on in this last week. Last week, I came on the air and I said and stuck to my conviction that the Los Angeles Rams and Oakland Raiders would be the two teams that would end up moving into the Los Angeles market in a few years, and that the San Diego Chargers would stay at home. A couple hours later, the Chargers and Raiders released a joint statement that they were working together to land a stadium in Carson, California. It was going to be privately financed. The teams were going to take on the cost, and they also said that they were looking into that, but they were going to continue trying to negotiate with their current locations to get stadiums built in the cities they currently reside in. So immediately, when I heard that news, I was like, oh man, I came on the air and I look kind of foolish today because look, now they're actually looking in Los Angeles. But when I started to analyze it a little bit more, I'm going to still stick to my guns. I am doubling down. You know why? It's because we play to win here.
You play to win the game.
And I firmly believe that it's still going to be the Raiders and still going to be the Rams moving into Los Angeles. Here is why. The Raiders are in the city of Oakland, and the city of Oakland does not want to pay to help land another Raiders stadium. They're already paying $20 million a year still on the renovations they did on the Oakland Coliseum to get the Raiders back from LA in the 90s. So how much would it cost them on top of that $20 million if they were to build a new stadium? Well, just to improve the structural area where the stadium would be built on, it's going to be over $300 million. That's not even getting the stadium built. That's just to improve the structural area. And then you got to include the stadium building and all that. It's going to cost them a whole buttload of money, and I don't see the city of Oakland doing that. So I think the Raiders are definitely going to move. The other key thing, and this just happened yesterday, the city council in Inglewood had their vote that we talked about last week about whether or not to let the Rams, or excuse me, not the Rams, the Kroenke ownership group start the development project in Inglewood for building a new football stadium. It was approved unanimously. So they're ready. They're pretty much ready to start putting shovels in the ground. And it was, mentioned that could happen as early as the end of this year. And so now we get back to San Diego. And this has been a very, very tough situation for the city of San Diego to hear. It's led to some tough rhetoric on both sides. And it came out right away. Mayor Faulconer, when he had heard that the Chargers had been working with the Raiders on a Carson Stadium project and that plan had been discussed for the last 9 months, he was furious. You have some great sound bites out of him. Other media organizations have talked about this to death, about Faulconer coming out and saying they're not negotiating in good faith. How could you do this? And it sounded like someone who was very upset and very closely tied to the situation. So what's kind of happened in San Diego since then? Well, this San Diego City Council gave a unanimous approval that the city was going to be committed to keeping the Chargers in San Diego. It's very symbolic, but what it means that there's a lot of support from City Council. There's a lot of support from the mayor who said, I want to keep them here. I want to keep them here. The Chargers belong in San Diego, and they are committed to this cause. Remember, the city of San Diego does not have to pay anything left on Qualcomm. That's all paid off. It's ready to go. It's pure profit for everyone involved in that stadium deal. So they're not going to be in the situation like St. Louis or the Raiders would be in, the Rams or the Raiders would be in, where those cities have to still pay on their past stadiums, so they're less inclined to pay for a new one. This is the key point to me when you look at the finances. Those two cities have no incentive to further their bill on those on stadiums for these teams. They're in poorer communities and they've got a lot of other problems they've got to deal with, and that kind of expenditure is not going to fly with the taxpayers. In San Diego, it's a little more doable because you're not paying on that old stadium. That's the key. So I still think that the Raiders are going to move to Los Angeles, and I think the Rams are going to move to Los Angeles as well. And how I see this playing out is exactly how it's kind of played out since the announcement of the Raiders-Chargers joint stadium was made last week. Faulconer met with Chargers chairman Dean Spanos. They agreed to a 9-member task force, which is going to make a site/financing plan recommendation in the next 3 months. That's great. So in about 3 months, we should have a really good idea of what's going on and if this is doable. And I think it is. I think the Chargers have San Diego where they want them, and I think the city of San Diego is willing to play ball much more than the cities of Oakland and the cities of St. Louis. So St. Louis will get their stadium approved. They'll get it built, and the Rams are probably going to be the first team to move. And once the Chargers kind of announce their stadium here in San Diego getting done, that's when I see the Raiders coming through and saying switching their plans up, because the Raiders aren't going to be able to finance that stadium all on their own, most likely. It doesn't really make sense for Los Angeles to have two distinct stadiums anyways. And I see the Raiders either moving in as tenants to the Rams stadium or helping come up with some of the financing for Kroenke and building it together and still capitalizing on the market they have there. So I still see the Raiders, Rams, Los Angeles, a couple years. I'm still confident and still going to double down on the fact that the Chargers will stay in San Diego. All right, folks, it has been a fantastic time here today for me. I love doing the show. It's my favorite part of the week. This is Sports 101. That is sports with an S for the $. That's because we love to talk about the business of sports here. Thank you so much to James Nicholson and Britt Burkett for coming on the episode today, so we could discuss yoga, hockey, real estate, and good deals and bad deals. Tune in next week, same time, same channel. That's Thursday from 2 to 3 on ESPN 1700 AM. This is Will Maldonado signing off.